the unknown. No one ever achieved their goals by being comfortable. And so I appreciate you all stepping outside your comfort zone and taking the initiative to be here to learn today. So without further ado, we can officially kick off this discussion. So when you think of traditional finance, right, what do you think of? Most people probably think of commercial and investment banks. You think of, lenders. You think of stock markets, forex exchanges. A lot of these entities can be commonly referred to as centralized financial institutions. And the second follow-up question is what experiences and emotions come to mind whenever we think about these things? Generally, from an individual's perspective, a lot of these experiences and emotions that come to mind whenever you think about traditional finance are generally they're not very pleasant, and we're going to kind of get into why that is. So these centralized or traditional financial entities utilize multiple intermediaries to facilitate transactions and movement of funds and assets. They utilize multiple different custodies for assets. And what I mean by that is basically like individuals or groups that hold funds for individuals on their behalf in order to make payments, transactions, trades, whatever, on their behalf, right? There's multiple different intermediaries that help ensure compliance, and the complexity of all this results often in a lack of transparency, right? And also as a result of the complexity of these corporate systems, how many numerous layers there are and all the different people trying to take a piece of this pie. The costs are relatively high, while these fee structures, basically like the reasoning behind why you're paying what you're paying, remains really opaque. It's not very clear to the average individual. And additionally, a lot of these traditional financial systems, the transactions, your movement of assets can be very slow, especially for cross-border payments due to, again, those intermediaries that are involved within this legacy system. And what's unfortunate is that while these legacy systems have been in place across the globe for many decades, and those who are leading this industry have seen their power and wealth grow, the shortcomings of the industry have seemingly become more and more apparent to the average person. And this is in large part because of the proliferation of access to the internet. The ability to see these apparent failures in policy and design have caused stress and panic at almost every level of the financial influence sphere, all the way down from the person who's trying to just store a small amount of money in their bank to be able to preserve their wealth to, large investment banks that are trading billions and billions of dollars every day. And we've seen insolvencies, over leveraging. We've seen a lot of greed coming from people, from humans. We've seen the same thing with fraud. And we've seen, coupled with this overburdening sort of oversight, yet with little accountability, right? The average person has no means to, provide that accountability for these traditional financial systems. And it's effectively, we have to trust in the governments and these governing bodies to actually do their job. But the people who are doing these things are humans, right? And humans are imperfect. And I just want to point out, I don't mean to start this conversation off so focused on all these negative things, because where we're going is truly a positive place. I bring this up because there are individuals and companies at every juncture within traditional legacy financial systems looking to take a slice of those profits and fees for its usage, while minimizing the risk that they personally incur. And I just wanted to point out that it's seemingly within our human nature to want to seek to maximize our profits, even if at the detriment of others, right? And so we're going to get to, how decentralized finance helps us solve this. And so if we consider the other issues that I recently outlined within the traditional financial systems, such as access being traditionally restricted by geographic location, by the amount of income that you make, potentially even by more arbitrarily determined factors such as what political parties you support, what jobs you have, and other regulatory requirements. We can see predatory practices start to develop, and we kind of begin to see the bigger picture of what these incumbent systems truly are before us, right? And I think this is a statement that describes these traditional financial systems well, is that these legacy systems work well for those that work well within the predefined system. And the subset of individuals that work well within this predefined system created by these governments and individuals in power with a lot of money, it's a shrinking group of people with every day that passes, right? And if you don't meet this criteria, which at times definitely can be arbitrarily decided by these centralized entities that control traditional financial institutions, then you, me, all of us can be excluded with very limited means of reconciliation. So let's take a step back real quick and take a look at the financial state of the world. Many people worldwide, if we look at the global population, right? Many people worldwide, and you could even maybe say the majority of people worldwide, are unbanked or underbanked. And even those with access to traditional financial systems are still overwhelmingly in restricted economic situations, meaning individuals who live in these first world countries, like myself, the majority of our population are still experiencing an overwhelming amount of economic restriction. Most people aren't looking to become incredibly wealthy. They just want to be able to store and slowly grow their value. They want to be able to preserve their purchasing power. And they want to do it in a way that isn't encumbered and slowed down by regulatory and geographical hurdles and these barriers that are put up by individuals with incredibly larger amounts of capital than we do, right? And so that's why we see this world that is becoming increasingly digitized and globally connected. We see people starting to look for alternative solutions to solving some of these financial problems they're facing. And that leads us to where we're at today. And that is what we're here to discuss about, and that is decentralized finance. So at a very high level, decentralized finance, which is also referred to as DeFi, is just a group of financial services that are built using blockchain technology. And at its core, decentralized finance eliminates the need for intermediaries that we listed and kind of described within these traditional financial systems by allowing people, merchants, businesses to facilitate and empower peer-to-peer transactions and create these financial opportunities and increase general access to financial services and markets through these peer-to-peer networks, such as blockchains. And the thing that really makes all this possible is the use of smart contracts. And before we move any further, I do want to break down this small piece of technical information. The question, what are smart contracts and how do they enable decentralized finance? Because it is a pretty key part of what is being built and leveraged today. And it's going to be a pretty important building block for understanding some of the more nuanced pieces of digital financial systems. So in a really simple manner, or in a really simple description, smart contracts are self-executing programmable contracts with predefined rules and conditions that are written in code. So this programmable contract basically says that these programs automatically execute and enforce the terms of an agreement, which is kind of what we're talking about when we say contract. And in the case of decentralized finance, this contract can be anything, almost anything. Some examples would be swapping assets, borrowing or lending money, liquid staking, voting. All of these would count as smart contracts, right? When you want to do something, once the predefined rules and conditions for the action you want to take are met, this program, this coded program will automatically execute that action on your behalf, right? So it removes the need for a lot of the intermediaries that are required within traditional financial systems. So smart contracts are kind of this foundational technology within decentralized finance because they enable the automation of a bunch of various financial processes without the need for these intermediaries again. So when you interact with DeFi applications, they're often going to seem like any other internet-based application at first glance. And ultimately, this is kind of the goal for decentralized applications is we don't necessarily want people to know that they're using a blockchain protocol, right? They honestly shouldn't even really care. It's that they're just getting the best service possible for them. But one of these key defining factors is that they utilize these DeFi applications utilize smart contracts that kind of act as the back end of a traditional application. So, when you're interacting with an application and you take an action on that web page or you take an action to do something on an application, that thing on the back end that you don't really see that receives your input from your interaction does some computation or makes some change and produces an output from the interaction. That is all done by smart contracts within decentralized finance. So it helps keep track of all the changes to what's going on with the application and actually makes those changes as users choose to do so. So you can kind of think about it like this, like when you interact with an application, the smart contract is actually what performs the action you're taking. And it updates this kind of in quotes database that keeps track of all your user specific stuff, right? So imagine just giving a really easy example. Let's say you wanted to make a post on Facebook, right? Or make a social post on any of your favorite social media channels, right? If this was let's say it was a decentralized application, the action of you actually posting what you want on the application, that would be done by smart contracts. So the thing that actually puts it up so that everyone can see it. And then the smart contract also is storing your post kind of in its internal database so that, when people want to go back and look at what you've said historically, they can do so, right? So it's very similar sort of action here. So outside of smart contracts, I do want to give another quick analogy that an acquaintance of mine recently shared about the difference between distributed ledgers, which I'm really referring to blockchains here, as the database that is being used to store all the data processed from these smart contracts, and some of these legacy databases maintained by companies like banks or lenders or something. And I think this will make sense to you guys whenever when I get done with this. So when you think of money, regardless of what currency it is, when you think of money that you have in a bank, it looks like your money is actually sitting in your account and you go and check it, right? You can see what your balance is, and it, to you wouldn't know that, you wouldn't know any different if that money actually wasn't there. And when you send money from one bank account to another, it actually seems like you transferred the money that you owned into a different bank account. So now you no longer own this, and this other person actually does own this. What is actually happening is that when you deposit money into your bank account, those banks don't actually keep your money in your account, right? They need to be able to make money. And one of the ways they do that is by taking your deposits and then using that to make money elsewhere. And so that money that you deposit into your bank account is not actually, let's say, physically owned by you. And in the example of where you're sending money from one bank account to another, the company isn't actually giving that money to the other individual and taking it away from you. It's really just shifting values around in this database, right? You can think of it like a really simple Excel spreadsheet where the amount of funds I have is in one column, and one cell, the amount of funds someone else has in one. And when I make a trade, they're just moving those numbers around in this database. Meanwhile, none of us actually really own this. The bank is going and doing whatever they want with it. But in contrast, with blockchain technology, if I have a token or coin in my wallet, which is the equivalent of a bank account for this exercise, I have actual ownership of this value. That token, that value, is actually in my wallet. I am the true custodian of those assets, and only I determine their fate. There's nothing that a bank or anyone else can do to take that from me, as long as I don't compromise the security of my wallet. And for the example of sending funds, when I send this asset to another individual, the blockchain actually updates this, and I legitimately send my assets to the other individual. So I no longer have that asset, and the other individual will have true ownership of this asset. And this basic principle is what kind of spurred the innovation of decentralized finance, even before smart contracts were created, right? This is the example of something that I think we all expected out of legacy systems, but are just slowly realizing that this is not actually what's happening, and that is having access to true financial sovereignty. And so I guess, just taking a historical look at, where we're at and where we've been, you could maybe argue that DeFi started in 2009 with the launch of Bitcoin. But personally, I would argue that, what we now consider DeFi started with the launch of smart contracts on Ethereum. And, so far as global adoption, considering the global adoption of this technology, crypto adoption is tracking very well with the initial rate of adoption for the internet, which, in my opinion, and I'm sure and hope a lot of you also share this opinion, is incredibly promising. We're seeing a lot of global businesses and payment processors integrating with these blockchains, which is helping increase the adoption of self-custody wallets, which will ultimately help increase the rate of adoption and usage of DeFi for the larger global population. So for now, let's go back to why DeFi is so valuable. DeFi offers much broader accessibility since it operates on the internet, and it doesn't rely on physical locations for financial institutions. It's often much faster, much more efficient, as these interactions occur directly on blockchain networks, which directly reduces the need for intermediaries. DeFi really helps break down the geographical and politically motivated limitations for access to financial systems, so much so that anyone with an internet connection and a crypto wallet can participate in DeFi. And while there are definitely edge cases of particular services being limited to a subset of participants, this is almost always the result of it being a centralized entity that is using the technology, such as smart contracts, the same technology used to create decentralized finance, to create a sort of, in quotes, gated version of DeFi products, right? And everyone is going to have their own feelings on what are the most important aspects of decentralized finance compared to centralized finance. But if someone were to ask me what I think is the most important aspect, I truly believe the expansion of global financial access, that breaking down of geographical, political, monetary restrictions, and empowering access to financial systems for all individuals in the world, it is the core pillar of value for DeFi, right? And this is further empowered by the reduction of cost and time when you're trying to use these services, and the transparency that exists within these new economic systems. So just know that as I sit here talking to you across the world, right, I recognize that we all have equal opportunity and access to the financial opportunities presented in DeFi. We all have the same chance to preserve and grow our wealth together in a way that's equitable to all parties. And I truly find something beautiful about that in this part of our system. And so up until now, we've kind of been talking about traditional finance and decentralized finance in somewhat vague terms. I've been describing these systems kind of as a whole and talking about some of their large scale qualities, but we haven't really gotten into any of the individual components yet of the actual financial services, which is what really users really care about, right? Most people don't care about the database that the applications they use leverage. They just care about the quality of the service they get. So we're going to actually dive into some of these key products within DeFi that are seeing some of the most usage across blockchains. But I do want to stop here for a brief moment. If anyone has any questions about some of these core principles and the building blocks of DeFi, whether it be smart contracts, any of the pros and cons about DeFi and centralized finance, please feel free to drop your questions. I'm happy to take a moment here to stop and give everyone a moment to think or pose their questions.
Thank you very much, Red. So, guys, if you have any question regarding DeFi, so far what Red have discussed, please do feel free to ask any question at all regarding the introduction aspects, regarding the P2P, regarding the smart contract, or anything regarding DeFi, which he has explained. And there is any place you don't even understand, please do feel free to ask before we move on. Don't forget, guys, we have a workshop where you guys see how this DeFi works, how these things are being done. So yeah, please, you can use the Telegram chat to ask, or you can just wave request to speak, and then I'll bring you up. Okay, I think I have a question. Someone has a question, right? So, Dalu said, so basically, DeFi is introduction of blockchain technology in the financial market with the help of smart contracts. Yep. So I believe
Yes.
Fred have answered your question.
Yeah, so that is probably 2/3 of what DeFi is. The other part, which is the decentralized aspect of it, is really critical, and that's basically that last little piece that I talked on, which is centralized entities like a bank can use smart contracts if they want to, right? But it doesn't actually, which is great. Costs should come down. Some of the geographical barriers and regulatory hurdles should come down. But one of the most important parts of this is that it's not controlled by a single entity, right? So a bank would be considered a centralized entity. A government would be considered a centralized entity. Any private company that would be a centralized entity. So for DeFi, what's the key defining factor for decentralization is that no single individual controls, the terms of service and the parameters that dictate the usage of these applications. So with decentralized finance, no single person can make these arbitrary changes.
Answers the question, Dalu. Okay, so DM'd me. Someone is asking that is DeFi like the same thing with the traditional finance they are used to, that can they also transact with people send and receive money or probably make some transaction? Like, is it the same someone is asking by DM?
Yeah, so this kind of goes into, this is a debatable topic, right? Um, you could you could make the argument that decentralized finance kind of started with Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin's real purpose is to be able to facilitate peer-to-peer transactions. The only thing it's meant to do is for you to be able to send assets to other individuals, right? That's why there's no decentralized exchanges built on Bitcoin. That's why there's no borrowing lending markets built on Bitcoin, and that's also the reason why you don't see native Bitcoin. And we'll kind of get into what I mean by native. But it's the reason you don't see a lot of native Bitcoin being used in DeFi is because its sole purpose was to be just transfer, right? But that is a key portion of what of financial services, being able to send money to people. So I think you could make the argument that DeFi would include the ability to send assets in a peer-to-peer way on a decentralized network. But what we consider DeFi today, with the use of smart contracts, is much more inclusive and expansive than just sending funds.
Much right. I think there is no any other question for now. We can move on. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. All right, cool. So now we'll move on to actually diving into some of these products, right? We'll start with the question of what are decentralized exchanges? And then we'll talk about what the value that they provide, right? So one of the simplest and most frequently used DeFi products are decentralized exchanges, also referred to as DEXs. And what decentralized exchanges are they are peer-to-peer marketplaces where individuals can swap cryptocurrencies. And actually, that decentralized exchanges are now growing so much that they are including assets outside of cryptocurrencies to be able to swap. But anyways, they enable this peer-to-peer swapping of assets without needing an intermediary to facilitate and settle a trade. And so in the example, the example question that was asked just a moment ago, about transferring funds, right? This kind of takes that interaction to the next level. Let's say I want to transfer funds to someone, but I also want them to send me funds in a different type of asset, right? This sort of exchange and making sure that that this exchange goes exactly as planned is done by these peer-to-peer marketplaces. So for anyone who isn't really familiar with the concept or hasn't really heard about decentralized exchanges in general, I'll highlight a scenario, right? So imagine you own an item that you want to trade. A DEX is effectively an online marketplace that isn't controlled by a single group or person, that automates the buying and selling of assets without needing any human intervention, right? There's no need to find someone to facilitate that trade for you. There's no need to find someone to negotiate prices, to oversee the exchange of payments, to provide receipts, right? This is all done by the DEX itself, by the technology itself, right? So when individuals want to swap cryptocurrencies using a decentralized exchange, they don't need to trust any third party to hold their assets for them. They don't need anybody to settle this trade with the counterparty, which is the person that you're trading with. And this ultimately cuts down on the cost and risk associated with a lot of these transactions. And additionally, decentralized exchanges are naturally censorship resistant, meaning there's no central entity that can arbitrarily choose to impose restrictions and limit who and what can be utilized within the platform, which also further lowers the barrier for entry for use, right? So while there's a variety of decentralized exchange designs that exist now, they all leverage smart contracts to automate order matching and settlement of trades. And before we move forward, showing some of these examples of different designs and what they're specifically good for, I do want to take a moment to highlight the difference between a centralized exchange, crypto exchange, and a decentralized crypto exchange. And I kind of got into some of those details in one of the previous questions that was asked, but I want to highlight this again because it is an important distinction. A decentralized exchange does not control any of the funds deposited into the exchange, and there is no central authority that controls the terms of the service being provided. So when users interact with a decentralized exchange with their self-custody wallets, the only thing they are interacting with is a smart contract, and there is no human intervention on their part, right? And these self-custody wallets are wallets that only the user themselves control. No one else has access to it. No one else can control, send, block your funds. And this is one of my personal, it's such a core building block of blockchain technology and DeFi, but this small core building block still is not lost on me, the value of self-custody wallets, where you actually are the one holding your assets. So anyways, in contrast, a centralized crypto exchange does technically control access to the funds that you deposit in their exchange. And they are acting as the custodian of your assets. And this can be beneficial, but it's generally perceived as detrimental because these centralized entities can change the terms of their service at their discretion. And this includes, but isn't limited to, revoking access to particular geographical user bases, changing fee structures, misappropriating funds. I know everyone in this group might not be as familiar with some of the bigger crypto collapses in 2022 from some of these centralized entities. My mind immediately goes to FTX. But yeah, so think about all the things that FTX was able to do with their funds that, let's say, they shouldn't have been able to, or they were able to arbitrarily make some of these decisions, right? That was because it was a centralized exchange. A decentralized exchange would not be able to do any of those things. So now that I've made that important distinction, we can talk about some of the different types of designs for DEXs. And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to categorize and talk about these different DEX designs based on the types of assets they're best suited for facilitating trades. So for this discussion, we will broadly classify crypto assets within three main categories. And this roughly tracks for what we see in legacy financial markets as well. We have volatile assets, which comprise probably like 90 to 95% of all of the crypto assets that are in existence today, right? So this includes gas tokens, so things like Ethereum, things like Secret, things like Atom. They include governance tokens, which most gas tokens are also act as governance tokens. It depends on what type of blockchain network you're using and whether or not they have on-chain governance. But that's kind of a different discussion. We won't go too much into that. But just know governance tokens fall under this umbrella category of volatile tokens. And then we also have utility tokens. Tokens that are used for to be able to unlock specific interactions, or they have specific functionality within applications. So that class of assets kind of roughly covers, let's say, 90% of all crypto assets. And it probably makes up, like, I'm trying to do some rough math here. It probably makes up like 70, 75% of the value total crypto market cap value. The next class of asset types, or the next class of assets, would be stable assets. And so this primarily is referring to stable coins and flat coins. A stable coin is effectively a token that tracks a very specific value, which is generally the value of some sort of sovereign currency, right? So when most people think about stable coins, they think of things like USDC, right? It's a token that its price is pegged to the value of a US dollar. And there's a bunch of different US dollar stable coins. There's a bunch of different stable coins that track other currencies. Up until this point, the US dollar has been the predominant currency that these stable coins are pegged to, but we are seeing the growth of other currencies. And this is kind of in part fueled by a lot of countries actually looking at how they can create their own version of a stable coin. And you probably heard of, or you might have heard of, governments talking about the creation or R&D looking into creating these things called central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. And so those are a type of stable coin. The other type of stable asset is referred to as a flat coin. And a flat coin it's very similar to a stable coin, except that it tracks, instead of being pegged to a static value, it tracks a moving value that generally is associated with purchasing power, right? And so these are relatively new types of stable assets, but they are growing in interest and adoption and utilization. And we can briefly talk about that in a little bit whenever we talk about Shade Protocol and what it does. And then the third main type of asset type are derivatives. And what I mean by a derivative, it's a representation of another asset, right? So it's like, and this includes things like liquid staking derivatives. If anyone has ever staked any assets within the Cosmos ecosystem, you might have heard of liquid staking. With traditional staking, you actually have to lock up your assets, and they are, in quotes, bonded, which means they can't be used for anything else. What liquid staking does is it allows you to still keep your assets staked to where you're earning staking yield. You're able to vote in governance. You're able to help secure the blockchain, but you're also able to use this asset in DeFi. You can send it, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want with it. And so this would be a type of derivative asset. And then we have things like synthetic assets. So you can imagine, I'm trying to think. A good example would be, let's say, like, imagine like a tokenized stock, right? So like if you could buy Tesla or Apple as a token or as a share of a token, or for assets that, are digital representations of assets being held by other entities. So like synthetic gold or synthetic oil or other commodities like that. So I wanted to provide this base level understanding of these broad asset types so that we can understand what types of DEXs are best utilized, right? For most people, let's say your average everyday person, they're likely going to be most interested in stable assets, right? Your average everyday person, if we exclude the individuals that are within DeFi right now, we just look at the average citizen of your average country. Most people just want to store and preserve their purchasing power. And most people traditionally do that by putting money in savings accounts or they, let's say, put money in a 401k or like in a retirement fund. So for a lot of people, stable assets are probably the thing that makes the most sense to them. Their easiest step into decentralized finance and decentralized assets. The next one would be volatile assets, right? This includes the most popular cryptocurrencies out there. This includes Bitcoin. This includes ETH, Cardano, all of your main like BNB, Sol, Atom, all of those tokens are considered volatile assets, right? So those would probably be the next most applicable, right? Bitcoin acts as a store of value. Ethereum allows you to interact with these different DeFi applications. So I just wanted to point that out so that we can kind of understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the value proposition for the different DEX types. So if we now look at the different types of DEXs, we're going to, for this exercise, say that there are two general types of decentralized exchanges. There are automated market makers, also referred to as AMMs, and these help facilitate peer-to-peer trading through algorithmically determined pricing and through the use of liquidity pools. And we'll go a little bit more into this in a moment. But there's also order book exchanges, which is where traders place buy and sell orders at very specific prices, and that creates the liquidity that users are able to swap with, right? And I want to make it clear there are definitely more variations of DEX designs that utilize multiple AMM curves or provide benefits of both AMMs and order books. But this simplification of DEX types covers like 95% of all DEXs in existence. And for this general educational overview, I think this is most applicable for what we're talking about. So AMMs, also known as automated market makers, are a type of DEX that is able to facilitate this peer-to-peer trading through algorithmically determined pricing and through the use of these liquidity pools. Liquidity pools are effectively just kind of what it sounds like, pools of cryptocurrency assets that are provided by users to help facilitate trading, where each liquidity pool typically consists of equal values of two assets within a trading pair. And AMMs use an algorithmic pricing mechanism based on that is based on the ratio of assets in the liquidity pool to adjust the price according to supply and demand. So just give a very quick example here. Imagine you have 10 of token X and 10 of token Y in a liquidity pool. And I want to trade one token X for one token Y. After that trade, there will be, before the trade, those 10 X tokens equal the value of these 10 Y tokens. But I want to trade one of these X tokens for a Y token. After I make that trade, there's going to be 11 of these X tokens and 9 of these Y tokens. And as a result of that shifting in the balance of these, or the ratio of these assets, the prices of these assets get adjusted as a result. And the reason users would want to actually provide liquidity is so that they can earn fees from users swapping assets within pools, as well as potentially earn incentives provided by the DEX itself. And these external incentives are generally used as a way to encourage people to actually deposit liquidity, right? You can kind of think of it as like a bonus or a subsidy. So users who make swaps in these liquidity pools ultimately pay swap fees to liquidity providers. So the other main DEX type, or the other main DEX type of DEX that is utilized are order books. And an order book based exchange relies on traders actually placing buy and sell orders at specific price levels. The price at which a trade occurs is determined by the matching of these orders on the order book. And it can be very, very dynamic as new orders are placed and executed. I don't know if any of you guys have ever looked at like centralized exchange order books, or if you ever looked at like stock exchange order books. The prices of assets are constantly fluctuating as people are putting in buy and sell orders. So, give me 1 second, grab some water. All right, good to go. So, order book exchanges don't vary much in the type of utility and efficiency that they provide. So we won't go into too much detail about the nuances of this type of exchange. However, I am going to show you guys what this DEX looks like and what the trading experience looks like later in this conversation. We'll be spending the majority of our time talking about DEXs, or like within this topic, looking at the different types of AMMs and what they're good for. And while it may seem, technically jargon heavy, I think it is important to note that all DEXs are not built the same, and some are better for certain types of trades than others. And so I'll do my best to keep most of this technical information out of this discussion because it's not super applicable to the conversation at hand, but there are three main types of AMM curves. And when I say curve, this is effectively just like a curve just determines how liquidity is distributed across all the potential price ranges that these assets could have. So for, let's say someone's wanting to provide liquidity for Bitcoin and ETH, right? The curve of the AMM that is being utilized determines the depth of liquidity and the prices and the prices for each of these different price points, right? So for some of these different AMM curves, like constant product, when you provide liquidity, you're providing liquidity for people to trade at the current spot price, but you also have a little bit of that liquidity that's put at like where Bitcoin is equal to $10. And then you also have a little bit of that liquidity provided that's put all the way up where Bitcoin is $1 million, right? And so that curve just determines how concentrated how concentrated the liquidity is and how prices are determined. And so there are three main types of AMMs. There are constant product market makers. This is, the most traditional type of DEX that you can think of. This is what the original Uniswap V1 was. Anyone who has used Osmosis, who is familiar with the Cosmos ecosystem, the early days of Osmosis, and still a lot of their pools utilize these constant product market maker curves. And so there's that. There's the way prices are determined. It follows that same example I made earlier, where it's like, I have 10 of these tokens in an LP and 10 of these other tokens in an LP. If I want to trade one of those tokens for the other, when the ratio of those token balances shifts, it causes the prices to shift as well. So that's a really easy way to think about constant product market maker. Constant function market makers are particularly they're let me take a step back. For constant product, as one asset in value goes up, the other one has to go down in a constant manner. That's one of the key things to think about this. With constant function market makers, you're simply wanting to maintain the sum of the quantities within the asset. And so this is particularly relevant for stablecoins. Because with these types of AMMs, you know, as the value of one asset goes up as a result of, or let's say as the amount of one particular asset goes up, the other one's value does not have to change, accordingly in the opposite direction. So these are particularly useful for stable coins, but there aren't a whole lot of decentralized exchanges that utilize a pure constant function market maker curve. The other one is, and this is the one I'm personally most interested about, it's the hybrid function market makers, which is basically a hybrid between the two previously mentioned AMM types. And this currently represents kind of the most promising of the AMMs, as it combines elements and the value propositions of both of these previous functions to allow for more flexibility. It allows for better customization and managing liquidity and reductions in losses for liquidity providers. So I'm going to take a second here. I see some people asking some questions. Give me 1 second. Can all cryptocurrencies be used for DeFi? Technically, yes. It might be a bridged version, or it might be a derivative or synthetic version, but a representation of all cryptocurrencies can be used. Some of it can be used more natively than others, but for the most part, the answer to your question is yes. Are there any centralized exchanges? There are a bunch of centralized exchanges. Think about Coinbase, Kraken, KuCoin. A lot of these bigger names, those are all centralized exchanges. Yep, Binance is one as well. Huobi, Bybit, yep. Example of decentralized exchanges. Yep, Uniswap is a great example. Trader Joe on Avalanche, QuickSwap. If you're more familiar with the Cosmos ecosystem, there's examples like Osmosis. If you might be familiar with Kujira, you might be familiar with ShadeSwap. Hopefully you are. I'm a little biased towards ShadeSwap, yeah, there's all sorts of different decentralized exchanges, and it's not super important to fully understand these AMM curves. I only bring this up because it's going to be helpful for us to think about, like, if I hold a particular asset, what type of DEX do I want to be looking for, right? And so, and hopefully I'll explain this well enough. If I don't, just let me know. And but for the most part, you don't really need to know much about these AMM curves. This is all stuff that happens on the back end, right? What you care about, or what most people care about, is when they go to an exchange and they look at how much am I going to lose in value when I make this swap, right? If I want to trade USDC for USDT, let's say I want to trade 10 USDC for 10 USDT, and I'm losing $1 along the way, that's super inefficient. But if there's another DEX where it's like I lose a tenth of a penny or a tenth of a cent, that's obviously much more efficient. And the thing that actually makes it more efficient are these AMM curves. So for most people, they don't really care. They just care about where can I get the best price for these swaps. And really, I'm just probably a technical nerd. This is why I enjoy talking about stuff like this. But it's the AMM, on the back end that's helping determine that efficiency. So we'll get into. Since I see your question, I definitely will get into that in a minute. I do want to make a few more points real quick. So let's revisit those types of assets I mentioned earlier, right? We have volatile assets, stable assets, and derivatives. Volatile assets, which represent the majority of crypto, think about Bitcoin and ETH, are most efficiently traded on order books. Because with order books, you're actually placing buy and sell orders where you're not worried about slippage slippage is basically the change in price that is expected for your transaction, right? So if you place a really big trade on a AMM, the slippage is going to be the loss in funds based on the change in prices as a result of your transaction. But with order books, you're placing a buy and sell order, and the only loss of funds technically are just from the fees that you pay to the actual to the order book itself. So for volatile assets, they're most efficiently traded on order books. However, the experience can be somewhat intimidating for those who haven't used them before. I know that's how I was personally. If you're not wanting to potentially utilize an order book, the next best type of DEX that you'd want to leverage for these types of trades are hybrid AMMs, which utilize those, this hybrid function market maker. And so, oops, go back. That are best made using these hybrid AMMs. And if you've ever heard of something called concentrated liquidity, like Osmosis recently launched concentrated liquidity, ShadeSwap launched concentrated liquidity back in April. The newer versions of Uniswap all leverage concentrated liquidity. And we're not going to really dive into that right now. Just know it's, very, very efficient for swapping these volatile assets. Next type of asset is the stable assets. So you're thinking of USDC, USDT, DAI, things like Silk. These are most efficiently traded on either these constant function market maker pools. So you can, if anyone's familiar with Curve Finance, where I've heard of something called the 3 pool or the 4 pool, it's basically a pool of a bunch of these different stable coins that all share the same value. And most stable assets have the same price outside of those flat coins, and thus changes in relative amounts and ratios of stable coins doesn't impact pricing for those assets when using this type of curve. Again, these are not very popular pools. There's only a few DEXs that really leverage this type of AMM. The next best type, which leverages all of the pros of these constant function market maker AMM types, are these hybrid DEXs again. And if you remember back to what I said, I thought the most interesting and promising type of AMMs coming out were these hybrid DEXs, these hybrid function market makers. It's because they share the value proposition. They provide all this efficiency of both of these original AMM types, right? So additionally, these hybrid DEXs, these hybrid AMMs are extremely efficient as they inherit some of the efficiency from the constant function market maker. And then if we look at the last class of assets, which are derivative assets, thinking about liquid staking derivatives, they're, again, most efficiently traded on these hybrid DEXs, these hybrid function market maker pools. And for this, I'm going to, hopefully, you know what I'm talking about here, but you can think of ShadeSwap here, for these hybrid DEXs that are built specifically to be able to facilitate trading, like really efficient trading for derivative assets. And the way they do this is that, and again, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail here because I might be one of the only ones that finds this interesting. But effectively what these hybrid function market maker pools are able to do is they concentrate liquidity around redemption prices for derivatives. So similarly to how stable assets, which have a really predictable price, are most efficiently traded using these hybrid function market makers, derivative assets also have a generally predictable price, as these derivatives are tracking the price of an underlying asset with a known yield rate. So this allows us to concentrate significantly more or significantly deeper liquidity for trading within the most ideal ranges. And so now, even though I mentioned all that, I think it's also important to note that all types of assets can be traded on all types of DEXs. You can trade volatile assets, stable assets, derivatives on all of the above types of AMM on DEXs that utilize all of the above AMM curves, that utilize order book exchanges. The purpose of this exercise was mainly to highlight how these various types of DEXs worked, and then which ones are best suited for trading particular assets, which ultimately translates to saving more money on your trades. So, for those who are a bit more conscious or just want to learn a bit more of like, well, how can I really, save money whenever I'm trading? Or let's say I want to be able to make sure that, this action I take, is as efficient as possible, because, I might be in a position where I don't have a lot of room to lose money, right? I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I just want to swap to, let's say, one stable to another, right? It's important to be able to understand how you can do that in the most efficient way possible. Okay, I see another question here. This is perfect, because I was about to say we can stop here for a brief minute if anyone has any questions. So it's good chance. If anyone has any questions, feel free to add them. Really appreciate you guys asking these questions along the way. It helps me understand, the basis of education that you guys have, and helps me understand where I can provide a little bit more clarity. So give me a second. Let me read this. Okay. So this looks like from Crypto Kristen. This looks like you got two questions. So first one, can liquidity pools be created for stable coins? Yes, 100%. There are liquidity pools. This is actually a great question. I don't know how much time I want to spend on this, but yes, you can pair volatile assets to stablecoins. You can pair derivative assets to stablecoins. You can also pair stablecoins with stablecoins. And each one of those different types of liquidity pools offers a different value, right? And I think this is maybe a bit too much to go into, but since you asked about slippage, I'll probably touch on impermanent loss a little bit here. But so to answer your second question, if you're trading between stables and altcoins, which gives more return if you are an LP, I would say liquidity providers probably earn the most providing volatile assets, but that's just purely based off the fact that swap fees are generally highest for volatile assets and they're lowest for stable assets. If you're trading this is just an example, but let's say I'm trading $1 million USDC for $1 million USDT. I want that swap fee to be as low as possible. The average swap fee for volatile assets is like 0.3%, I believe. And so for $1 million USDC, that would be a 30,000 USDC swap fee, versus most stablecoin swap fees are like 0.01%. So you're talking about 30 times less than that. So it would be like $1,000 on a $1 million trade. So as a liquidity provider, it is important to consider your earning potential, right? One of the biggest things that liquidity providers should look at are, one, how much volume is happening in these liquidity pools, because that directly correlates to how much you earn in swap fees. But something else to consider is impermanent loss. And very briefly, when I mentioned, as when you make trades and pools and ratios of assets shift for constant product pools, um, you know, uh, that changes the composition of the LP tokens that people hold, right? So if I provide liquidity at a ratio of 10x tokens to 10y tokens, and someone makes a trade and it changes the balance, if I want to redeem those LP tokens for the liquidity I provided, I'm going to redeem it at the current ratio of assets, right? And so this is where the idea of impermanent loss gets introduced, because let's say I'm providing liquidity for like Ethereum and Atom. Let's just for a super simple example. If the value of, well, one, as people make trades, the ratio changes, the asset ratio changes, but also as the prices of these assets change, so does the value in these the ratio of values in these pools, and it can cause further impermanent loss to where when the value of those LP tokens when you originally provided liquidity, when that differs from the value of the liquidity and the ratio of assets that you provide, when those differ, that is impermanent loss. And generally, impermanent loss refers to the loss of funds or the loss of value, so to speak. You're not actually losing funds; you're just losing value, and that can happen from, just the price of assets going down. Let me see. We have another question. Oh, okay. Okay. So your next question had to do with airdrops and that being based off of liquidity provided. I don't have a whole lot of information regarding Arbitrum's airdrop, nor how they based its distribution on liquidity provided. But the reason they might want to do that is that, for a lot of applications or blockchains, right, you have to, when you think about who are your most valuable participants, stakers are often, Secret Network is in the Cosmos ecosystem, right? We have the ability to stake assets, right? And so when people think about airdrops, they think about airdrops going to people who stake to these platforms. And the reason I think that was originally done was because stakers do provide an actual benefit to these blockchains, right? They're helping provide security. But you also don't want to ignore these other groups of individuals who forego the ability to earn staking rewards and in return go and provide liquidity, which is basically what makes it possible for people to even buy this asset if they want to stake it, right? So I think for Arbitrum, it sounds like they wanted to recognize the value that liquidity providers provide and be able to do something and be able to include them in that airdrop distribution. Yep. Let's see. So great question, 6. What risks should you be aware of? Risks, that's a great question. There's more generalized risks, and there's more specific risks. Generalized risk would be for trading, the value of your assets is determined by supply and demand on markets. So just holding assets in general has risk of price depreciation. As far as for trading on DEXs, your biggest risk is probably like lack of liquidity or efficiency, meaning like how much money you can actually swap. or how much of these assets you can swap without losing more money. I feel like there's not really a whole lot of risk for actual swapping outside of general smart contract risk, right? There is always the inevitable possibility, not saying that this applies to everyone, but like there is a possibility that, let's say a malicious actor changes code within an exchange and makes it so like you're trying to trade something and they just take your money. I think that would probably be the biggest risk, but that's like, that risk exists literally everywhere. So, make sure to, if exchanges have audits, which is basically like another group of engineers going over the code and checking its safety, that's always good to see, because it's, another set of eyes checking on the security of it. So as far as risks, I would definitely say just look at, try and simulate a few trades on different exchanges, see where you can get the best get the best trades possible. And I apologize for anyone who is not understanding some of these more complex things. I truly apologize for that. Sometimes I find it difficult to be able to rein myself back. Liquidity refers to just assets that are available to trade, right? They're available right now for you to put up. So, like if I had $1,000 and I wanted to let people use that $1,000 to trade, that $1,000 that I put up would be referred to as liquidity. And I'll try and speak a little bit louder. All right, cool. So now we can go on to this next part of this discussion, highlighting one of the main types of DeFi products, which are borrowing and lending markets. And so I think this one will be a little bit more straightforward than DEX's. DEX's, there's a whole lot of nuance to them, and it can be very difficult to try and distill all this important information into one, really short time period. But I think borrowing and lending markets are a bit more straightforward. So again, let me know if any of you guys have questions. Please feel free to ask me to stop or clarify anything, as needed. So a DeFi lending market or protocol is effectively a financial service that enables users to borrow and lend their digital assets in a peer-to-peer fashion. So the main value proposition for lending protocols is that they offer users the ability to earn interest by lending out their assets to individuals that want to borrow, in order to help users access liquidity without relying on traditional financial intermediaries. And so before we dive into this topic any further, I want to highlight what this would look like in a traditional scenario, like a traditional financial scenario. Let's say you own something valuable. It could be a house, it could be a car, it could be land, gold, really it could be anything, right? Something that you hold that has value, that you want to hold for a long period of time. You know that this item has value, and you want to be able to access some of that value without having to sell your item. Traditionally, you would have to go to a loan broker, such as like a title loan company or a bank, like a service that offers like home equity loans. These are some simple examples. So traditionally, you would have to go to this centralized person or group, and you would be very restricted in what assets you can actually borrow against, the enforcement of that contract that you're entering in, and the rates associated with the borrowing. And additionally, On the flip side of this scenario, if a user wanted to allow someone else to use their item and get paid interest for allowing them to borrow it, they would have to basically find someone who is willing to, one, facilitate that deal, two, enforce the terms of that agreement, in the event that they don't pay back what they borrow or its value drops. But three, also settle that deal whenever you decide to close that financial agreement. And so the beauty of DeFi lending protocols is that this removes, again, very similar to DEXs and DeFi products in general, right? It removes all of the geographical barriers and the need for intermediaries to actually facilitate these interactions between individuals in a peer-to-peer fashion. And it offers a lot more flexibility in what assets can actually be utilized. So, kind of in summary, lending protocols offer individuals a unique opportunity to earn interest from lending their digital assets to others for use in DeFi, as well as offering unique opportunities for individuals looking to borrow liquidity for use in DeFi. And this can be also beneficial for a lot of sort of secondary reasons. And you can see some of these on this slide here. Borrowing against your assets can be tax advantageous for many jurisdictions, as you're not actually selling your asset and having to pay for capital. You don't have to pay taxes on that interaction. But I do want to point out, I'm not familiar with jurisdictions outside where I live, so it's important for everyone to check your own laws and regulations about what transactions are considered taxable. But a good example of what this would look like would be, let's say I want to save up stable coins, right? I want to save up USDC, USDT, because I want more exposure to the US dollar. And this is particularly applicable for people who don't live in the US. Or let's say I want to slowly save up stores of value like Bitcoin or digital gold, right? But I also want to be able to earn money from them, right? I don't want to have to just purely buy these assets and hold them. I want to be able to use them to make even more money. So what you could do is you could allow users to borrow those assets or a portion of those assets, and they would pay you interest on that. And, at any point, you can withdraw your lent assets, when you'd like. And so, again, I imagine this example is particularly fruitful to think of for and interesting to citizens outside of the U.S. or citizens of developing nations that would like to hold non-native currencies in order to store their purchasing power while being able to continue earning from it. And so before you interact with any of these protocols, it's important to understand a few key pieces of knowledge that affect your experience. And this is much, much more applicable. Like these technical details are much more applicable for borrowing and lending protocols than the previous technical stuff I covered regarding AMMs, right? The curve that AMM or that DEXs utilizes, like it impacts the efficiency, but users don't really need to know what type of AMM curve is being utilized, right? They just need to know where they can get the best rates, right? But for borrowing lending protocols, these technical details are actually very important, as they play an important role in determining the actual interactions you make. So we'll quickly go through these. The first one is interest rates, which is money paid by borrowers to lenders as a fee to let them use their liquidity. And interest is generally based on the utilization of the supplied assets, meaning that if only a small amount of assets are being borrowed relative to the supply, the utilization is low, which will result which will result in lower interest rate paid out. So this is good for borrowers, bad for lenders. So the second piece is accepted collateral types and collateral supply caps. So accepted collateral is effectively, when I say collateral, I'm talking about the actual assets that are accepted. So example collaterals would be like Bitcoin, ETH, USD, USDC, Atom, Secret, all these other tokens, right? Those are all types of collateral. And collateral supply caps refer to the maximum amount of these assets that can be supplied or lent out. And generally, these supply caps are put in place for security measures. The next piece is something called max LTV, which is loan to value ratio. Users can borrow up to a particular amount of value against the collateral they put up. So when you borrow assets on one of these platforms, you have to put up what's called collateral, which is the value that assets that have value that are backing up your loan in case you can't pay it off, right? So users can borrow up to what is called the max loan to value ratio, which is the maximum amount of value that can be borrowed relative to the value of the collateral they put up. So if a borrower, if the position they have, like a borrow position, goes above this max LTV threshold, their positions are marked for something called liquidations, where effectively liquidations are where the collateral that you put up are sold off to the open market in order to maintain the solvency for the protocol and making sure lenders are made whole. And this only happens whenever the value of your collateral goes below a certain threshold, right? It's important that lenders don't lose, that lenders are not losing money on putting these, on allowing individuals to borrow their assets. And it's also important to make sure that the protocol that's basically even enabling this interaction, to make sure that it stays solvent or make sure that it doesn't take on bad debt. And so while there are some additional variations of borrowing and lending protocols, such as perpetual markets, which is like where it allows users to leverage trade their assets. I'm not going to go into those at the moment because those require even further, deeper understanding of like the economic mechanisms that work. And then, so the last protocol parameter that, or important piece of information to understand about borrowing and lending protocols is smart contract risk. And this goes back to one of the questions that was asked earlier about what are the risks of interacting with these DeFi products. Is smart contract risk effectively exists in every single product. It's just the risk that something that someone could maliciously exploit, could exploit the smart contract to do something that it shouldn't be able to do. So I'm going to stop here for a brief moment in case anyone has any questions about DeFi lending protocols. And again, we'll go through an example of what this looks like at the end of this during brief workshop simulations. Last key piece that we're going to be talking about is going to be, what does the future of DeFi look like? What's currently missing, and how are we going to solve these remaining problems? But I'll give it a few moments for you guys to ask any questions if you have them. Grab some water, grab something to eat. It's been a good hour and a half so far talking to you guys. So I appreciate you guys sticking with it, and I hope you guys are learning something thus far.
This section has been amazing so far, and personally, I've also learned a lot from you within this section. And there's a lot to learn about DeFi and the way you simplified it, and make sure you touch in every aspect of DeFi. It's really amazing. Okay, I think we have one question from Right. See, Rhyme is asking if a user lends an asset from lending protocol to stake and earn interest after the whole event, can the user get access to the whole liquidity or just the interest accumulated by the user? Well, this question it seems like he's trying to play a game. Borrow an asset, then after borrowing his assets, staking his assets, and then earning interest. Okay, so what do you have to say about this?
Yeah. So if I lend an asset, um, and I'm earning interest from it, if I want to if I want to withdraw those assets that I previously lent out, I can do that at almost any time. Some protocols might put like time restrictions on it, and that's kind of up to the protocol. That's also something to understand. Like, are there time restrictions and withdrawal limits? But most of them are like instant. And when you withdraw your position, you do withdraw. Uh, you withdraw the any interest that you've accumulated and have not collected thus far. And then, as far as your second question, what are the terms of collateral agreements? That is a phenomenal question, and that is something that is determined by each protocol is going to have a different risk assessment framework. And what I mean by that is when you're determining how much you want to let people borrow against assets and at what the maximum amounts are, what the supply caps are, all of these things are determined by doing these risk assessments and trying to take into account all of the potential factors that could cause um, issues with solvency or bad debt being accumulated. So protocols never want to take on bad debt. So they want to make sure that the parameters that they put in place for how they want individuals to interact, they want to make sure it's as safe as possible for both borrowers and lenders. So short answer to your question is each borrowing lending platform is going to have a slightly different risk assessment or way that they assess risk for each collateral. And as a result, the parameters for borrowing and lending are going to slightly differ from protocol to protocol. And to answer your question, La Kryptone, yes, you're more than welcome to ask questions after the class, whether it be tomorrow, later this week, next week. I'm in the Secret Africa chat. Feel free to at me in that Telegram chat. See Popelak posted my Telegram handle above. So anytime you guys have questions, I'm always happy to answer. I love talking to people and educating people about this. So more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. Cool. So I'm going to try and keep this next section quick because I know we have a 2-hour limit here, and I want to make sure to highlight what some of these different exchanges look like. But so this next part is okay. One more quick question to answer. Can someone use an NFT as collateral? Great, another great question. And this kind of touches on what I mentioned at the very beginning. Is that right now most borrowing lending platforms are specifically for like crypto tokens. Tokens and coins, right? But there are borrowing and lending protocols that are now allowing users to borrow against their NFTs and to lend their NFTs to be able to earn more. If anyone has ever heard of something called Paraspace, that's an example of a lending platform that allows you to basically stake your NFTs and borrow against them. It's really interesting. There's some very interesting risks associated with this because NFTs are generally not liquid, and something without getting into too much like detail, for these borrowing lending protocols, you need to be able to facilitate liquidation. So when people borrow too much, or whenever the value of what they the value of the collateral they put up goes down too much against the value of what they borrowed, you need to be able to sell those assets and make sure your system stays solvent. For NFTs, these are, again, they are non-fungible tokens, right? So they're one of ones. And the market for these types of assets is very illiquid. And what I mean by that is there are not a lot of them being traded. They're all different. So they all have a different value. Unlike with Bitcoin, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin, right? One USDC equals one USDC. But with an NFT, right? One of my Bored Ape Yacht Clubs or one of my CryptoPunks has a different value than this other CryptoPunk that I've got, right? So you have to figure out a way to value these and make sure that you can, in the case of potential bad debt accumulating, you have to be able to make sure that you can liquidate these assets in a reliable manner. But to short answer to your question is yes, there are DeFi lending protocols that are now allowing people to borrow against NFTs. So let's move on to the last piece of our main discussion today, which is what does the future of DeFi look like? Or better put, what is still missing from DeFi and who is solving these remaining problems? So in DeFi, in relation to traditional finance, DeFi offers opportunities for higher returns through lending, yield farming, providing liquidity, trading, but it also comes with much greater volatility and risk. And this is something a lot of people don't like to talk about because everyone wants to talk about all the pros and cons and how much better things are. But anyone who's been in this space long enough knows and has seen the risks that are that are persistent in this industry. And it's not something to necessarily be super afraid of, but it's something to be cognizant of, right? DeFi currently operates in a relatively unregulated and immature space, right? If we think about when smart contracts first became available, which I think was 2014, maybe a little later, right? But we're talking about less than 10 years old compared to how long has traditional finance been around? And it's centuries old, maybe even millennia old, right? And so DeFi is operating in this
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check. So this operating in this immature space, this sort of unregulated space, this is great for innovation, but it also does pose some risks, right? Things are new, right? There's more security risks, just kind of statistically speaking, because they're newer than some of the existing legacy systems. That being said, we still see traditional companies and entities being hacked all the time. We see all of this misappropriations of funds, this over leveraging, kind of the cons of these legacy and traditional financial institutions. Those also have security risks, right? They also have regulatory risks, but they're a little bit more opaque. They're harder for people to see. It's because those traditional financial systems are not very transparent. And so it's just important to point out that it is in everyone's best interest to research and understand the risks that are associated with DeFi protocols before you interact with them. All interactions in DeFi carry risk, and I do mean that, all of them. And it's important for each user to determine and understand their own risk tolerances. So if we look more closely at some of the the key issues that are still being worked on within DeFi, we can kind of see where we're working towards, right? And I'm going to mention a few things that if you don't understand what I'm talking about, please stop me and ask me to clarify. But I've got a list of, there's 6 things in my opinion that are critical issues that need to be solved for DeFi as a whole, regardless of the network ecosystem that you're interacting with, in order for DeFi as a whole to push forward. First of which is we're still in early stages, right? The maturity of DeFi is nowhere near the maturity of traditional finance. Traditional finance is composed of hundreds, if not thousands, of complex interwoven markets, and the development of decentralized solutions lags behind that of legacy systems. It's a time thing, right? So as a result, the amount of money within these protocols is smaller than legacy markets and products, and that is understandable. This is something that time helps us solve. Lack of regulatory clarity. So regardless of your stance on regulation, regulatory clarity makes everyone feel more at ease, right? The rules are written clear in the sand, right? We don't have to guess what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. And whether we like those rules or not, it makes our lives easier because we know what, we know more about the field we're playing in. Education. And this can maybe even be broken down further into education and user experience, right? We as an industry still have a long way to go when it comes to educating individuals and providing resources and learning opportunities for individuals to learn about this new system, right? Traditional, think back to your time in secondary school, or if you went to college or to university, right? At least, where I live in the world, understanding traditional finance was never a part of our curriculum, right? And, in higher education, it's only part of your curriculum if that's something that you're choosing to go look at. And so and this falls into the lack of transparency and the opacity that we see in sort of these legacy systems, is that, there's not a lot of education around it. And something with DeFi that we have, I think, an obligation to do as individuals within this space is to help educate people about this. We are operating in a much more transparent fashion, and as a result, it is easier for us to pass along the knowledge that we learn to other people. And so being able to continue proliferating the educational experiences for user bases, and people like Pope have done such a phenomenal job with this in their local, in their local areas. And that's something I hope to also continue to replicate on my side. And then the last 3 things I'm going to mention, these are more technical hurdles. First one is composability. And what I mean by that is I'm referring to the ability for assets to move from chain to chain, and from protocol to protocol. And that's something that we have in the Cosmos ecosystem through IBC, which allows assets to move from blockchain to blockchain seamlessly and be able to be used in different DeFi ecosystems. This is not readily available in other ecosystems. There are other groups and groups of blockchains working to try and replicate things like this, but it's nowhere near where the Cosmos ecosystem and IBC is right now. So composability for assets outside of the Cosmos ecosystem, right? We want to be able to bridge Bitcoin into other ecosystems. We want to be able to bring Ethereum into other ecosystems. We want to be able to bring assets that haven't even been created yet, but people are working really hard on to try and create these new products, right? We want to make sure that when those do come out, that they have this, what I refer to as composability, meaning they can freely flow between these financial ecosystems, these decentralized financial ecosystems. The second piece, which is tied to that, the first part of composability are trust assumptions for bridging, right? Currently, composability for assets is made possible by bridging solutions. And I am not going to harp on all of the turmoil that we've seen with bridging solutions being hacked in various crypto ecosystems, but we have a long way to go when it comes to trust assumptions and security for bridging solutions. The third one, which is what I'm going to talk about most right now, is user privacy, right? We've seen, and I'm about to go into this, we've seen a lot of advancements in the efficiency, scalability, security, composability of assets within DeFi and the applications themselves. And if we think about the description of DeFi, I kind of talked about earlier, I think we can all agree that from going from centralized finance, traditional finance, to DeFi in general is a positive step towards empowering people across the globe with greater financial access. But there still exists flaws in the majority of DeFi architecture, and these are generally related to security and privacy, right? In the majority of DeFi applications, anybody can see the inputs and outputs from your interactions, including your personal data. And to highlight the potential severity of this lack of privacy, the publicizing of all this information, I'm going to give a simple analogy. And Pope has heard this analogy from me and Carter and many people like myself probably a few times. But imagine you're going to a local market and you want to buy food, right? Maybe you're buying dinner, or maybe you're groceries or whatever, and you swipe your credit card to purchase food. When you make that transaction, the cashier doesn't see your entire bank balance. They don't have the ability to see your transactions you made previously. So there is some level of privacy, at least user privacy, within traditional financial systems. If we contrast this to what is currently happening within decentralized finance, if you were to do the same thing, interact with a merchant in a market using a transparent blockchain or a public by default DeFi application, this can be somewhat of a security and privacy risk, right? These merchants and anyone who knows what your wallet address is can be able to see when you bought the product, how much you spent, the full history of your transactions, the amount of currency you hold, what lending positions you have, what your trading history is. And I'm sure I don't have to go into a whole lot of detail for you to understand why this can be problematic for like personal security reasons, for digital security reasons, and then just for, from a perspective of, privacy being a human right. We deserve as humans the ability to keep our data private. And so we're not going to go into technical details for security and privacy, but I am going to briefly mention why the importance of privacy, or why privacy is so important. And as this doesn't really take anything technical to understand the importance for. As our digital and physical worlds continue to merge into this single space, our digitalized identity has become used as the primary means of verification of our existence, right? Whether it be digital or physical. And as a result, the primary rights of ownership for this identity and all the data associated with it has to be safeguarded and protected in the same way and with the same level of importance as we do with our individual identities in the physical world. And people often, fail to understand the difference between anonymity and privacy here. Anonymity is referring to a state of not having a name or identifying information associated with an individual, right? Privacy is really getting at the state of being able to control who has access to your personal information and how that information is used, right? A lot of people, if they were given the choice of, hey, do you want to allow your data to be used for something if, let's say, I pay you for it, right? A lot of people might feel more comfortable with that if they had that option. But most people don't. They just automatically have their privacy kind of revoked from them. and that's just like a terms of service, so to speak. So if we take a closer look at like what is digital privacy, and what's a great way to wrap up what digital privacy is, right? I personally like describing it as digital self-sovereignty. What digital self-sovereignty means, and this is a core tenet of decentralized applications, this means that you truly have the right to digital privacy, where you are the sole owner of your digital property and you alone control its usage. You have the right to freely interact with any entity in the digital world, the right to open and fair relationships, and the right to global financial access. So if you think about what digital self-sovereignty is and what it empowers, and it being a core pillar of these decentralized applications, you can immediately see and understand how these DeFi products differ from these legacy financial products. And we've seen these same core principles of self-sovereignty eroded away in our physical world. Like, we as humans have the ability to take back this human right to self-sovereignty in our digital world. And for this to materialize into something meaningful for humanity, privacy for users and their data has to be part of this solution. And luckily, there are groups that recognize all these properties as valuable and are building solutions to the existing problems that face our legacy financial systems, and are working to expand global financial access to help, to help reduce costs and time associated with usage in a way that both empowers the self-custody of their assets and their data. And one of the products that I'm proud to be representing and here kind of talking about in just a moment is one of the projects I currently contribute to, which is Shade Protocol. So I'm going to stop here. I know we're at the 2-hour mark. So if we can't do the overview, like very brief overview for some of these products, I'm going to stop here for questions if anyone has any questions about like any issues in DeFi, anything like
that. Yeah, thank you very much, Red. It has been an amazing session. So, guys, if you have any question, please do feel free to hack. Before we dive into the workshop, I believe you guys are eager to see how DeFi works, how you guys can interact with DeFi, how swaps are being made, how liquidity pool works in the DeFi ecosystem, how you can build and learn as well, and how you can bridge token and some other basic things with DeFi. So, yeah, we'll be moving to that shortly. But before that, if you do have any question, either you request to speak or you just drop it in the Telegram chat. We are here to answer all your questions. Yeah. So, guys, feel free, please.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, if there is no question, I believe we can go into the workshop now. So, let's dive into DeFi.
Awesome. So we can officially get to the fun part of the discussion. Unfortunately, it's going to be cut a little short just because we've got some time restrictions. But we're actually going to show what it looks like to play around with some of these DeFi apps. And for this, I'm going to recommend we check out 3 different products. This is obviously not going to be a comprehensive overview, but it'll be helpful to highlight what the user experience looks like, what the interfaces look like, and what some of the differences between the products. And actually, before I get into this, I just want to highlight one more really important piece of information. And this is pertinent to anybody who uses any crypto assets in any network, blockchain, protocol, whatever. Whenever you make a transaction on a blockchain, that transaction is included in what's called a block. That's where the name blockchain comes from. And that transaction is validated and executed. These transactions on the blockchains can be viewed on tools called block explorers. So for the Cosmos, you might have heard of something like MintScan or PingPub. I think there's a few other larger versions. Many blockchains have their own native block explorer, but there are some that provide services for multiple blockchains. So if you ever need to look at your historical transaction details, you simply need to just search for your wallet address in a block explorer, and it will display your on-chain activity. So for this demonstration, for the first part of this demonstration, we're actually going to go look at Shade Protocol's ecosystem, which is a suite of private by default applications built on Secret Network. That is the protocol that I personally contribute to. And then we're also going to look at the Kujira ecosystem, which is a suite of public DeFi applications built on Kujira. And then we're going to take a look at Umi. So give me a second as I change what screen I'm sharing. One second. All right. All right. So this is going to be mostly just me kind of explaining what these ecosystems are and kind of how to interact with them. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. The application I'm currently on is app.shadeprotocol.io. You can view this website on a normal mobile browser. You can view it on desktop. If you're wanting to view it through a mobile wallet, you can do that. Like if you're using Starshell or if you're using Fina wallet, you can, yep, exactly, ProBlack. Fina wallet's awesome wallet to use to actually view these applications within the wallet itself. So they can all be accessed. Or if you want to just follow along, you can just type in app.shadeprotocol.io and follow along. So I mentioned Shade Protocol is a interconnected suite of private by default applications. And you can see the suite of applications that are currently available on the left-hand side. And when I say interconnected, I mean that all of these applications sort of share functionality and value accrual, right? So the main thing I want to show you with the Shade Protocol applications are two things. One, I want to show you Shade Swap, which is the hybrid DEX that Shade Protocol built. It's actually a very, very unique DEX. And the second thing I'm going to show you is Silk, which is the flagship product of Shade Protocol. It's our private by default over collateralized stablecoin. So I'm going to go to the swap interface first, right? So this is just a super simple swapping interface. Shade, utilizes a hybrid AMM model. So this is using, without going into too much detail, there are multiple different types of AMM curves that Shade Swap utilizes. And so depending on what types of assets you're actually trying to swap, you'll see changes in efficiency, right? So like if you try to trade between stable coins, you'll see, really, really efficient, swaps between those. If you trade between liquid staking derivatives, same thing. You'll see a reduction of efficiency for going between stable assets to stable assets. So an example of volatile asset to volatile asset swap would be Atom to Shade. Shade is a governance token and the value accrual token for the Shade Protocol ecosystem. So we can look at kind of see the efficiency that we're seeing here. For most of these DEXs, what you're really interested in are you're looking at comparing the values of like, what is the value of what I'm swapping and what is the value of what I'm getting? And the difference between there should be a result of the fees that you pay and any potential slippage, right? And the slippage is referring to price impact, although this is not a great indicator because the way ShadeSwap works, it actually allows users to capture arbitrage, which is why you see all of these different routes, meaning like as there are imbalances in prices and ratios, you can capture value that you normally wouldn't be able to capture in trades by routing it through particular token pairs. And so when you're interacting with the DEX or when you're interacting with an AMM, regardless of if it's a hybrid AMM or a single type of AMM design like a constant product market maker, you're most concerned with the value of the asset that you're putting in and what you're getting in return. And then generally there's analytics that are provided below that'll show you how much you're paying in fees, the price impact, what your slippage tolerance is, which is like how much change in value am I willing to deal with as a result of this trade. And then you have your minimum received as well. So this would be an example of a volatile asset pair, right? If we wanted to look at, let's say we wanted to perform an exchange between derivatives, like a volatile token and its derivative token. So a good example of this would be going from Atom to ST Atom, which is the liquid staking derivative, liquid staking derivative for Atom, right? So if I wanted to do this, you can see one. There we go. Yeah, so for this, you can actually see there is for this trade, I would actually be making money on this trade because there's currently an imbalance in this pool. But again, we're looking at the value of what's going in, the value of what's coming out. And then the other important things to keep in mind is your price impact. So you can tell this is a very, very low price impact. That is a result of the efficiency of the AMM curve that's being utilized. And you also see a reduction in the trade fee. Derivative swaps generally are much lower trade fees because with AMMs that are built for facilitating these trades, you don't have to charge as much. And then another example would be, let's say I wanted to trade stable coins, right? If I wanted to go from, let's say, like USDC to USDT. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, so this is even more efficient than the derivative swap. We're talking about 3-cent difference between different stable coins swapping, which is exactly what you want to see when swapping between stable coins, right? You're not worried about the value of these assets changing. So you should be able to get an extremely efficient trade. And again, we're looking at value going in, value going out, and then we're also concerned with what is the price impact and what is the trade fee I'm paying, right? Trade fee is like the value that you're losing. That's that 3 cents right there, effectively. And then with most DEXs, they also offer the ability for you to see all the different pools. These are the liquidity pools that you can actually provide liquidity to and earn fees from. So, when you're looking at these pools, the things you want to be most you want to pay most attention to are likely the volume, because the volume is what impacts the amount of swap fees that you earn as a liquidity provider. And you also want to look at the APRs for what you would earn as a liquidity provider. Generally, this factors in what you would earn in swap fees as well. Okay, so for this is a good example because you are earning, this is just based off of recent trades, but you're earning some percentage of swap fees, and then you're also earning external incentives in these tokens. So if you go to another DEX like Osmosis or some of the more popular Cosmos-based DEXs, you'll be able to see external incentives provided. You'll be able to see the swap fees that you're able to accumulate, and yeah. So we're most interested in how much are we going to be able to earn based on external incentives, how much we're going to earn from swap fees, and then we also want to take an important look at what assets I'm having to provide liquidity for. So without going too much into this, if you provide liquidity for 2 volatile assets, that is like your highest impermanent loss, you have the highest chance to lose value from your LP position because both of those assets can go up and down in value. For stablecoin to stablecoin pairings, these have the least likely opportunity of losing value because the two stable tokens are doing exactly what the name says. They're being stable, right? So the value of those tokens and your liquidity, your LP tokens, isn't going to be changing a whole lot. So when you're providing liquidity, it's just important to consider what asset do I want to provide it against. Most DEXs, they want you to provide liquidity against their base governance token. So like with Osmosis, the main liquidity, the main asset you pair liquidity against is Osmo, right? Shape Protocol has taken a different approach to where our main asset you provide liquidity with is Silk, which is this private stablecoin. And that's really good for liquidity providers because it lowers your potential for value loss. And I mentioned two volatile assets, LP, you have your highest chance of loss. Two stable assets paired, you have your lowest chance of loss. And pairing a volatile asset against a stable asset is, meeting somewhere right in the middle, right? So this is really beneficial for liquidity providers, and we've seen that value. I've seen that value as a liquidity provider myself, but it provides a lot of downside protection. I'll just mention that. So again, just as a quick overview, ShadeSwap is a privacy-preserving DEX built on secret network that is front-running resistant by default. This means that the front-running resistance means that people can't unfairly extract the value from your trades. And so I'm going to stop here. I see some questions coming through. Hold on.
Any question, please do feel free to ask. Also, if you're on Fina Mobile, need to send in maybe one or two extracts to make a swap to see how it works. So you guys can check it out yourself to know that, okay, yeah, this is something you can really do. So you can also provide a liquidity as low as $5 as well. So I'm going to be sending maybe one or two extracts to maybe 5 or 6 people so you guys can check it out. Make a swap, see the swap be successful, and check out some other features on ShadeSwap as well. It's very simple and easy, and this is how you interact with the applications. Some DeFi applications, the user face might be different from Shade Protocol, but most of the features are the same. Depends on the text you're interacting with. So yeah, you can also swap, borrow, provide liquidity, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's the same features. Some have much more features, like on Shade. Shade has lots of features. You can bond, you can use the derivatives feature, you can check out the portfolio, the wrap. Some DEXs doesn't have wrap. Why some apps? You can also send, you can also migrate, airdrop, utilities, and there are several other functions. And the bridge as well. Some might not understand what the bridge is used for. So the bridge is used to, bridge into from other ecosystem to secrets. This might be confusing for you guys at the moment, but I think on the 5 section, you guys will get to understand how this bridge works, and you guys get to understand better cryptocurrencies and use cases and how you guys can quantify their value. Yeah. So yeah, just drop your screenshots and your wallet as well, so you guys can make a swap and check out how shit works. Please do feel free to ask any question as well. So after making the swap, just share the screenshot as well. So I want you guys to personalize it yourself to see how it works. Okay, now we are moving to osmosis as well. basically, let me just use this explanation for you guys so you guys can understand. So basically now, the funds that we are using for this event, for the data we are providing to participants, also for the fiat currency giveaway, that's the never giveaway should some doesn't understand what is fiat currency giveaway. So they sent us the cryptocurrency. So once they sent us the cryptocurrency, there are several things you can do. So you can either swap this cryptocurrency to another cryptocurrency using Chase protocol, or send it to any exchanges to convert it to Naira or to your fiat currency, or if you're in Ghana, to Ghana cedis as well. So when they sent us this token, that's to support this event, Shade Protocol, they sent us their native token, which is Shade. As a beginner, you guys might not really know what Shade token is or what are the use cases of Shade. So when they send us this Shade token, for we to be able to convert the shade token to Naira or probably to send it to our bank account, we need to make sure that shade can be tradable on any date. So and shade can be traded on shade protocol, that's the shade swap itself. So we traded the shade token to SRT, and SRT can be traded on Binance, which is a centralized exchange. It can also be traded on Kraken as well, which is also a centralized exchange. So after trading, making the swap on shade protocol, on shade swap, then we transfer the token, that's SRT, to a centralized exchange, then convert it to fiat using the P2P exchange. This is very, very simple. So I've seen a lot of people asking me, okay, how do you convert this token to money in real life? How does it work? How do you move it around? So basically, this is how it works. So, like we working for projects pays us in token. Some pays us in a native token, while some projects pays in stable coins. Our stable coins are USDT, Silk, USDT, and we have several other stable coin depending on the ecosystem you're interacting with. So once we receive this token, if it's not supported on from centralized exchange, or if you don't have any escrow to convert it to fiat for you, all you have to do is to make use of some of these different applications like Shade Protocol, or make use of osmosis, any DeFi application that supports this token, or which this token has liquidity pool you can trade with. Then from that, it's not very hard, it's just something that's very, very simple. And I want you guys to express it and make it swap and set to what it's very, very simple. So yeah, I've seen the wallet address and I'm going to be sending it to I think 5 or 6 people, so you guys can make it swap and try it works. I don't know if that's okay, but if my explanation is kind of okay. So I'll just use some analogy so you can really understand much more better. can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Please, you can go on while I send the tokens to them.
Cool. Yeah. So what this does is this allows your this means that all of your actions that you take are all private, right? So if I send any one of you some of these atoms that I just bridged over into Secret Network, no one will be able to see that information other than you and me. If I make a trade with this atom I just brought in, I'm the only person that knows I made that trade, and I'm the only person that knows how much I traded it for. And so that's the reason why we in quotes wrap assets. We're providing this layer of privacy. So now I've got this atom that I can go do whatever I want with, right? I can, I can do a small swap, right? Let's say I want to do, oops. There we go. And okay, something else to keep in mind here. Something to keep in mind whenever you're doing these transactions, all of these DeFi applications are built on a blockchain, right? Whenever you perform a transaction, you have to pay something that's called gas, right? And that, you might remember me talking about gas tokens being a type of token, a type of volatile token. Gas is what is used to basically perform those transactions that you're trying to do. And for Secret Network, the native gas token is Secret, SCRT, right? And so just keep in mind as you're doing these transactions, you can see your secret balance down here in the bottom left. Just make sure that you have enough secret to do these transactions before you do them. So if I wanted to make this swap, it literally takes, a few seconds, boom. I just made a trade without needing to include anybody that had to know my information. I didn't have to share anything with anyone. I didn't have to request any help from anyone. I can just make these trades whenever I want. And now that I swap this for Shade, I can go do whatever else I want with Shade. I can stake my Shade. I can provide liquidity for my Shade. Possibilities are not limitless, but they're numerous. While you guys are briefly, still playing around with Shade Swap, I am going to talk very briefly about Silk, which is the stablecoin built by Shade Protocol. It's the flagship stablecoin for Shade Protocol. It's also the largest decentralized stablecoin in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is a pretty cool accomplishment. So I just want to briefly show you guys this. And this is just some details on how you can find out more information about Silk. So this is every stablecoin has what's called a peg. It's basically the value that the token is attached to, or what it's like ideally attached to. So for a US dollar stablecoin, its peg is $1 US. Silk is different in that it is not pegged to a single currency. It's got a basket of currencies and commodities like gold and Bitcoin that are included in it. And so as a result of all these different currencies that make up the peg fluctuates a little bit. It's called it's referred to as a floating peg. Not super important to know the details about that, but just know that Silk's peg, unlike most stablecoins, is actually designed to fluctuate a bit. USDC, USDT, those pegs are remaining at $1 US forever. That's exactly what it's meant to do. Silk, it's meant to be fluctuating. And the reason we do that is because we want Silk to kind of track purchasing power. We want to optimize for purchasing power. So that slowly over time, you can actually buy more things with this token. Even though the value is very stable, you can buy more things with this token relative to what you could in the past. And so here you see the total silk supply, so total silk outstanding, the total market cap. You can see the rough performance. So like the variations in the peg are very minor, but it does fluctuate. And then you can also see what makes up the basket. So silk it's very different from most stablecoins. So I know this might seem a little bit jarring. So feel free to ask any questions if anyone has questions about silk. But I just wanted to bring that up and just show you guys a little bit about silk. It's one of the most important parts of Shade Protocol ecosystem. Like I mentioned, most of the liquidity pools on ShadeSwap have silk as a part of them. So growing the supply of silk is very important for growing the amount of liquidity provided on ShadeSwap. I'll take a brief second here. And I know we're somewhat constrained on time. So while Pope, while you're working on helping get some funds to individuals who are looking to interact with Shade, I'm going to briefly touch on the two other applications. I'm only going to spend a few minutes on these. I just want to show you what these products look like, right? So ShadeSwap is a good example of what an AMM looks like. Very simple interface. It utilizes algorithmic pricing to be able to determine the price impacts of trades. And it doesn't require anybody placing trades on the opposite side. Like I don't need a counterparty to trade with. I'm trading within the pool. An example of the other main type of DEX, which is an order book exchange, is the exchange is called Fin. And this is built on the Kujira blockchain. And so this is what a traditional order book looks like. So in order to actually see this DEX, you'll have to connect your wallet. But key pieces of information to see here are you can see all the different types of trading pairs here on the left side. You can sort by them. And you can see over on the right side, this is what what people think of when they think of an order book, or this is what most people should really think of when they think of an order book, which is all the open orders on the right-hand side of the screen. Well, you've got recent trades and then the actual order book, which is right here. And the biggest difference in the trading experience on an order book and trading on an AMM is the process of placing a trade. Most AMMs are for market trades, like I showed you on ShadeSwap, right? If I want to make a trade, I just put in the amount I want to swap, and it facilitates the trade for me. With an order book, I have to place I actually can do market trades here, but the ability to facilitate that in an efficient way is severely limited because the depth of liquidity on order books is generally much, much lower. So most people place limit trades, and that's what you see all these different line items in this book. These are all limit trades. So for a good example to highlight this is the USD, USDC and USK, right? So this is all people who are wanting to, this is people who want to buy USK for USC or with USDC. And basically it's like people are willing to sell their USK at higher and higher prices as you get down here. And this is people who are willing to sell their USK for USDC. And this is the price of USDC. So this is your sell side, all the stuff in red, all the stuff in green. This is your buy side. And these are all limit orders that people or automated strategies are placing in there, right? And I will say, at least for me, I'm sure some of you feel the same way. This interface can be quite intimidating because it requires users to be very precise about what they want to trade and how much they want to trade for. However, this does unlock greater efficiency once you get past that learning curve, because it helps you make trades at the exact prices you want. So if you want to be really particular about building trading strategies, order books are generally, a really good way to do that. And then, so I just wanted to take a very brief second to highlight an order book. I'm not going to go into all the different functionalities here because it can be quite burdensome to go over all of them right now. The last thing I want to show you guys, and then I'll open this up to questions, and then we can kind of wrap this up, at least from my side. Pope, if you want to continue on with with the interactive portion of this discussion, please feel free to. But the last thing I want to show you guys is what a money market or a borrowing and lending platform looks like, and I'm going to show you what UMI, which is a decentralized borrowing and lending platform. So, okay, for just to answer your question real quick, Krypton, if you're just typing in, like if you're on a normal mobile browser and you go to app.shadeprotocol.io, you won't be able to sign in with your wallet there. You have to go to the actual Fina wallet, go to the applications list, and then click the Shade Protocol apps, and then you should be good to go there. So, all right. So very briefly, just want to highlight what a borrowing and lending protocol is. It's very, very simple. Just like the explanation of what borrowing and lending protocols are for is very simple. The interface is also very simple. So what we see is just general analytics. How much are people lending? How much are people borrowing? And then you see a breakdown of like what assets people are borrowing most. And then you see all of the different markets that are available, right? So, and here you see, how much is being lent, how much is being borrowed. And then you see how much lenders are being paid, and you can see how much are borrowers paying. And so, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to lend my USDC, right? I could go in here, and it's super simple. You just click supply. You determine how much, if I had USDC in here, I would type in how much I wanted to supply. It would tell me what my interest rate is. And then you would just simply approve the transaction, and you would immediately begin accruing interest. If I wanted to take a loan out against this, then I could borrow against it. You input how much you want to borrow. You would have to put up collateral against this. And then, once you set how much collateral you want to supply and how much you want to borrow, simply approve the transaction, and that's it. So it's very, very straightforward. Whatever positions that you have available, they show up at the very top, which is this section right here. So very easy to manage and keep track of. I will say it is, if you are using borrowing and lending platforms, it's very important for you to check your positions. It's very important for you to check your positions frequently, because prices change, and you don't want to get liquidated just because you didn't know that prices were moving so much. So yeah, this is again, this is what most borrowing lending markets look like. Very, very simple interface for both borrowing and supplying assets. Umi is just one example. There are plenty of other examples of borrowing and lending markets on Ethereum, on Arbitrum, Solana. Every major crypto ecosystem probably has a native borrowing and lending market. And all of them are going to share very, very similar functionality and efficiency. So with that, I will stop here. If anyone has any questions about anything that we've discussed, please feel free to share them now. I'm happy to answer the questions live right now. If not, I'm also happy to answer questions in the future in the Secret Africa chat. Really love what the group has been doing, and so I'm happy to support your educational endeavors as much as I possibly can.
Much, right? You really did justice to DeFi. I believe everyone you understand what DeFi is, how it works, and fundamentals of DeFi. So am I right, guys? I believe you guys understand what DeFi is. So, and the workshop has been going well, and I believe, yeah, everything was really simplified. So please, if you have any question, do feel free to ask. We still have some minutes before we end tonight's section, and Red has he has really tried for us. This section is over 2 hours, 30 minutes, and he has been explaining everything to you guys. So I think it deserves a round of applause. And also, make sure you are following him on Twitter. So make sure you are following him on Twitter so you can learn more about DeFi, check out his protocol, also try out the shit swap as well. Yeah, don't worry, guys. They are sending the extra access to you guys so you guys can personalize it and check out the decks.
So I do want to point out one thing here, Pope, and I've noticed this just from some of these screenshots. You guys will see in your screenshots, if you see a button that says view balance next to the asset, when you click that button, what you're doing is creating something called a viewing key. And what this does is, like I mentioned, when you bridge your assets into Secret Network, they become private by default. So people can't see your balances, people can't see your trade history, any of that stuff. The way that you are actually able to see your own token info is through these viewing keys. You're basically, it's a way to prove you are the owner of it, and you are able to decrypt the encrypted asset data. And so all you have to do is click that view balance button and approve the transaction. That's going to basically create this decryption key that allows you to see all your asset information. But just know that you are the only one with this viewing key. So only you can see this stuff. And so for anytime you see, like, anytime you maybe can't see your asset balance, or you're having trouble, let's say, seeing a view, your transaction history, you just want to make sure you have a viewing key for that. You can check to see if you have viewing keys for these set if you go to the portfolio page. I don't think this is one of the few pages we're still working on the mobile version of this. But if you don't have a viewing key set and you're on a desktop, you can just click the view balance on the portfolio page, or on the swap tab. If you see that view balance button next to an asset that you're trying to swap from or into, just click view balance, approve the transaction. It takes it takes like 1 cent or something worth of gas. Very cheap. And it just allows you to actually view your balances. So just wanted to point that out. That's something that's very unique to Secret Network. Secret Network is currently the only platform that offers private by default finance. That's one of the reasons, or that is the main reason, Shade Protocol built on Secret Network to begin with. We believe privacy is a human right, and that human right extends to your financial to global financial opportunities, and we want to empower individuals with their own we want to empower users' data privacy. So I just wanted to point that out there, that if you ever see view balance or any of those buttons that say view balance, it's purely clicking that button and creating your viewing key. It's purely a way to decrypt your encrypted information. It's a way to help keep your information private. And I would say, I would also like to, since this is, kind of officially ends, everything I had planned to share today. I know it wasn't a completely comprehensive overview of everything to be covered within DeFi. I mean, that would take weeks, honestly. But I do think this was a good introductory overview of how DeFi differs from legacy financial systems and how it can help the average person. And I think we did a good job discussing some of the more popular types of DeFi products and how they're being looking to be improved in the future. I also want to say I can't say enough positive things about our host and coordinator for this event, Pope Black. Thank you all. Thank you for all that you've done to organize this event and everything you've done in the past to help educate people about the opportunities blockchain provides. And even more importantly, spreading the word about the value of privacy within these blooming ecosystems. You're truly a pillar of the Secret Network community, and I'm proud and happy to be working alongside you, helping push, our mutual ecosystem forward. So much respect to you as always. And I want to say thank you to everyone who joined this discussion today. I hope you all are able to take something valuable away from this discussion. And like I mentioned throughout the conversation, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me in the Secret Africa Telegram group. Reach out to me on Twitter. Reach out to me on Discord. I'm generally very easy to get in contact with, and I love talking with new people. So, yeah. Again, thank you for this opportunity, Pope Black.
Thank you very much, Red. Thank you for joining us tonight. Then you sacrificed the time to join us, and it's really an honor to have you on our platform tonight. Thanks so much for your time. So, guys, I believe you guys are still receiving your activity to interact with Shitswap. So, if you have any question, you can reach out to Red on Twitter. I've dropped his Twitter handle and I've put it on a Telegram chat, so you guys can check it out. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, and also you can send him a DM on Twitter if you have any question, or drop your question here on the Telegram chat, and he's going to reply. He's always active most time, yeah. So I think that'll be all for tonight. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. And this is almost 9 p.m. my time. I don't know what time is it over there. Yeah.
It is almost 4 p.m.
Kind of still probably evening. It's late night here already.
Yeah, the sun is still out, so.
All right, thank you very much, guys, for joining us tonight, and thanks to our speaker tonight today for giving us awesome educational series tonight. And before we end tonight's section, thanks to all our sponsors, thanks to Rispano, thanks to Shade Protocol, thanks to Shilebus, and also thanks to Arnold's NFT. Make sure you guys follow them on Twitter. Those guys make sure we have this event ready for you guys, and also make sure we have rewards and giveaways for you guys for this event. They've been the way providing everyone with data for this event. Thanks so much to the sponsors. We really appreciate your efforts towards the African communities, and definitely we believe the community is going to grow much more bigger, and the adoption is going to grow much more better in Africa. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And this officially ends tonight's section